Time stretching audio to fit different tempos is one of Live's best known features. In this video, we'll discuss how Live analyzes and processes audio in order to time stretch clips and learn to choose a warp mode that matches the musical situation. So time stretching enables audio clips of differing tempos to play at the same tempo, and it does that without changing the pitch. So how this works in Live is that Live analyzes each audio file and clip to determine where transients or attacks are located. And when those attacks are periodic, it's able to derive tempo and length information. So I'm going to go out to a folder here that contains some audio that I've got in this set. And we can see here that I've got the .wav file, but then right next to that, Live has analyzed that and created this .asd file. And that's the file that contains that audio analysis for that transient location. So I'm going to choose an audio clip. We can see that down here in Clip Overview. And then I'm going to open up the sample box, because in the middle of that I have my warping controls. This button here, the warp button, is what enables Live to play this clip at different tempos. And if that is disabled, Live will just play it at its native tempo that we can see down here in this segment BPM, which is a little more than 80 beats per minute. Below that, we have a chooser here that chooses the mode that Live is going to use to warp this particular audio file. And if I click on that, you can see that there are several other options. But Beats is best for drum files, and that's what we have here. So let's take a listen and hear what Live does as I change the tempo. So I'm going to play this clip, and then I'm going to go up to the control bar and change the tempo as playback is occurring. So something important there is that when you speed a clip up, the transients get closer together, and we really don't hear any audio artifacts when we change the tempo. But it's when you slow down the tempo that funny things start to occur, and that's where the real work that Live has to do. So Live does that based upon these other two parameters down here in the warp area. In this case, it's trying to preserve the transient location. Other options are to set that at a rhythmic increment, and that's useful for creating some interesting effects. But if you're looking to just have a natural sound, transients is your best choice. Now, when you slow down the tempo, the transients get further apart and we end up with gaps in the audio. And it's this setting here, this loop mode, that determines what happens. So if I put it on the first setting, that's loop off, it'll play each transient and then it'll stop and wait until the appropriate time to trigger the next transient. And that can create a gating effect or leave gaps in the audio. Let's hear what that sounds like. I'm going to slow down the tempo here dramatically so you can hear this. So Live isn't filling in those gaps, and they're very, very obvious. The other two modes are called loop forward and loop back and forth. So in loop forward, Live's going to play the transient until the end, and then it's going to return to about the middle of that where there's a little bit of a crossfade and play it forward again. Let's hear what that sounds like. So at that very slow tempo, we can actually hear a little bit of ringing, a little bit of weirdness going on. The last one is loop back and forth. And in this case, it's going to play each segment of the audio, and it'll go to the end, and then it will actually play it from the backwards to the forwards until it gets to that midpoint, at which point it'll play it forwards again. And that yields a little bit more natural result. Let's hear how that sounds. Even at this really slow tempo, we can hear that that sounds a lot better. It's not perfect, but it's a lot closer. Okay, so if I speed that back up to a little bit closer to the original tempo, let's give it a listen. Little bit of artifact here and there, but really pretty darn close. Okay, let's take a look at a different situation. If we look at this bass audio clip, we're much more likely to use tones mode, which is optimized for more monophonic material like a bass line, a vocal line, or maybe even a lead line. And in this case, we also get this grain size setting. What we need to do here is think of the audio as a pile of sand where we're able to control the size of the grains of sand in that sand pile. In some cases, having a really small grain size is going to yield better results, and a larger grain size will work better. And where the pitch is fairly constant, that smaller grain size is going to work the best. Let's give that a listen. So the pitch is pretty constant in this example, and if I leave it down here at a lower setting or a smaller grain size, we're going to get the best results. In other cases, you may want to use texture if you're working with polyphonic material, or if you want to repitch something, you can use that mode. And then new with version 8, we've got Complex Pro. And Complex Pro is really great at working with loops that are whole songs. In that case, your clips are typically much longer, and Live has to work a lot harder to do it. In addition, here with Complex Pro, we also have control over the formants, and that is part of when you transpose a file, keeping those elements that are not supposed to be transposed in the same place. And that helps us get rid of that chipmunk effect. So if I transpose this loop a little bit and play it, there's a little vocal part in here that you'll hear that sounds very, very funny at this point. Let me do that one more time. We're such a slow tempo that it's not doing a really good job. So I'm moving from 117 down to about 70. That was quite a difference. But let's try it about 95 and hear what it sounds like. And you can hear that chipmunk effect happening with that vocal line. And if I move this formant parameter to a higher setting, it'll sound a lot better. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. And if I'm doing this at the normal pitch, I can pull the formants down and I can change the tempo to a much greater degree. Pretty remarkable. So Live's audio warping is so effective that it's pretty transparent to the music making process. In the next video, we'll take a closer look at warping and learn how it can be used to help create loops and fix rhythmic errors.